The United States has sent a careful but clear signal to India. The 25% tariff imposed over India's purchase of Russian oil may not be permanent. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said there is a possible path to removing the levy. For now, the tariff stays, but Washington is openly acknowledging that negotiations are possible. Speaking to Politico on the sidelines of Davos, Bessent said the tariff was imposed for a reason. According to him, it was meant to discourage India from buying Russian crude. He argued that the measure has worked. In his words, purchases of Russian oil by Indian refineries have collapsed, calling it a policy success. Bessent also outlined how India's oil sourcing changed after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Before the war, Russian crude made up barely 2 to 3% of India's refinery intake. After Western sanctions, Russian oil entered the market at deep discounts. India stepped in. At its peak, Russian crude accounted for a share in the high teens, boosting refinery margins and helping India manage inflation. Earlier in Davos, during the World Economic Forum Summit, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reacted to the proposal led by Senator Lindsey Graham to put 500% tariff for buying Russian oil, saying the bill aims to punish countries financing Russia's war through discounted oil purchases.
What do you want to say about sanctions, something else you've been working on, of course? What are you planning there in terms of Iran and the impact there? Do sanctions actually work? And the same question with regard to 500% secondary sanctions or tariffs on countries who purchase energy products from Russia.
Okay, so two things there. There are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believe the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under, the central bank has started to print money, there is a dollar shortage, they are not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft, no shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here. On the 500% tariffs on the buyers of Russian oil, that is a proposal that Senator Graham has in front of the Senate, and we will see whether that passes. We don't believe that President Trump needs that authority, that he can do it under IEEPA, but the Senate wants to give him that authority. And just to be clear, that we have Europe buying Russian oil still 4 years later, they are financing the war against themselves. India started buying Russian oil after the conflict began, but President Trump put a 25% tariff on them, and India has geared down and has stopped buying Russian oil. And then 3, China is a very large buyer of Russian oil, as they are of Iranian oil, as they were of Venezuelan oil. But guess what, Maria? No more Venezuelan oil for them.
So would you treat China the same as the others in terms of buying Russian oil with regard to tariffs and sanctions?
Well, we'll see what happens with this Senate bill, and with the Iranian oil, that'll be up to President Trump.
From India's perspective, the oil strategy was driven by energy security, not geopolitics. As a country that imports over 85% of its crude, India prioritized affordable supply in a volatile global market. The government maintained that buying discounted oil helped protect Indian consumers from global price shocks. However, the US is now linking tariffs directly to changes in India's sourcing behavior. Besant's remarks suggest Washington believes pressure worked. Yet market data tells a more complex story. Energy trackers like Kepler estimate India is still importing around 1.1 to 1.3 million barrels per day of Russian crude this month, unless there is direct government intervention. Analysts point out that Russian oil flows are not easy to stop overnight. According to Kepler, refiners operate on long-term contracts and logistical realities. India does have alternatives, including supplies from the Middle East, the United States, and West Africa. But switching at scale requires clear policy signals and stable pricing. The pressure on India is also political. US Senator Lindsey Graham has said President Donald Trump has cleared a bipartisan bill on Russian sanctions. The proposed law would allow penalties on countries that continue buying discounted Russian oil.
Tariff bill. So here's what I believe. I don't think we could have secured the border without the threat of tariffs. I don't think we'd have a European trade deal without the threat of tariffs. So if you want to end this conflict, then put pressure on Putin's customers. He sanctioned the two largest oil companies in Russia, which is the biggest pressure anybody's put on Putin since the war started. But we have 85 co-sponsors to give this president...
It's hurting Russia very bad, the sanctions.
Oh, yeah. So this bill would allow...
And India also is supposed...
Yes, sir. So he put a 25% tariff on India for buying Russian oil. I was at the Indian ambassador's house about a month ago, and all he wanted to talk about is how they're buying less Russian oil. Would you tell the president to relieve the tariff? This stuff works. So I'm hoping we'll bring the bill up, and it's from 0 to 500. He picks the number. Nobody else does. But if you're buying cheap Russian oil, keeping Putin's war machine going, we're trying to give the president the ability to make that a hard choice.
India is named directly. The message is blunt. Russian oil is being framed as financing the war in Ukraine. For India, this moment is a balancing act. Strategic autonomy, energy security, and global partnerships are all in play. The US hint at tariff relief opens diplomatic space, but it also underlines how energy trade is now tightly woven into geopolitics. The next move will depend on how Delhi weighs economics against pressure, and how Washington turns words from Davos into policy on the ground.